Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a time in every believer's life when we kneel down with desperate faith, we lift our prayers with trembling hands, and we wait for God to open the door, move the mountain, or fix what feels broken beyond repair. And then silence. Or worse, he says no. Now, that no can feel like a shutdown. It can feel like heaven's doors just slammed shut in your face. But I came to tell somebody today, when God says no, he's not shutting you down, he's setting you up. He's not rejecting you, he's redirecting you. That no is not punishment, it's preparation. Just because God says no right now doesn't mean he's forgotten about you. No, he's working behind the scenes. He's putting pieces together. He's aligning people, places, and timing. What you call a delay, God calls development. He's developing you while he prepares the better you're not even ready to handle yet. Moses wanted to step into the promised land. God said no. David wanted to build the temple. God said no. Paul prayed 3 times for the thorn to be removed. God said no. But every time God said no, he had something better in mind, a higher purpose, a deeper glory. So don't waste your time doubting. Don't waste your energy complaining. Don't let the enemy convince you that God's silence is his absence. He's still working. He's still moving. And when the time is right, when your character is caught up to your calling, he will say yes to something exceedingly, abundantly above all you could ask or think. When we hear the word no from God, our hearts often sink. We interpret it through the lens of rejection, of being turned away, of God withholding something from us. We think, why didn't God answer my prayer? Doesn't he see how much this means to me? But the truth is, when God says no, he's not rejecting you, he's redirecting you. See, we live in a microwave culture. We want things fast, easy, and exactly how we envision them. But God operates from an eternal perspective. He sees what you can't see. He knows the danger behind that relationship, the stress behind that promotion, the trap behind that opportunity. So while you're crying over a closed door, God is celebrating the disaster he just saved you from. His no wasn't to push you away. It was to point you towards something better. Redirection means God has a different destination in mind. You were headed one way, but he knew that road would lead to confusion, compromise, or collapse. So he blocks it, he stops it. Not because he doesn't love you, but precisely because he does. Think of Jonah. God told him to go to Nineveh, but Jonah went to Tarshish. God could have left him alone, let him run, let him drown in the storm of his own making. But instead, God redirected him, even through a fish. It was messy, it was uncomfortable, but it was necessary. That no to Tarshish wasn't rejection. It was divine redirection. Sometimes the very things we're praying for aren't bad. They're just not best. And God, as a loving Father, is never going to let you settle for something beneath your calling. That no you heard may have come in the form of a breakup, a job rejection, a failed plan, or an unanswered prayer. But all of it is part of his greater yes to your destiny. God doesn't cancel your purpose when he says no. He clarifies it. He course corrects you back into alignment with his will. God's redirection is often misunderstood because it doesn't look like movement. It looks like being stuck. You apply and don't get the job. You reach out and get no response. You pray and hear nothing but silence. But remember, just because you don't see anything changing doesn't mean God isn't shifting things beneath the surface. Sometimes he closes doors to grow your discernment. Sometimes he takes you the long way to develop your dependence. Sometimes he cuts off your plan so you'll stop leaning on your own understanding and start walking by faith. God's redirection is personal. It's tailor-made for your growth, for your maturity, and for his glory. When God told Abraham to leave his homeland, he didn't give him a map, he gave him a promise. Abraham had to walk by faith, trusting that the no to comfort and familiarity was actually a yes, to a legacy and inheritance he couldn't even comprehend. And when God told Paul no about removing the thorn in his flesh, it wasn't rejection of his need, it was redirection to grace. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Paul wanted relief, but God gave him revelation. Redirection is always connected to preparation. God is not just preparing the blessing for you. He's preparing you for the blessing. That no could be your training ground. That closed door could be building the muscles you'll need for the next open one. If you got everything you asked for the moment you asked for it, you wouldn't grow, you wouldn't stretch, and you wouldn't learn to trust him. But when he redirects you, he's teaching you to lean not on your own understanding, but to acknowledge him in all your ways. And then he will direct your path. We must shift our perspective. God's no isn't personal rejection. It's purposeful redirection. The delay in your life doesn't mean God's ignoring you. It means he's engineering something better. He's moving people, shifting timing, blocking distractions, and orchestrating divine appointments. That failed relationship, redirection. That closed business deal, redirection. That season of silence, redirection. God doesn't just shut doors. He shuts them with intention. He doesn't just withhold. He withholds with vision. Even Jesus experienced this principle. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he prayed, Father, if it be your will, let this cup pass from me. That was a request. But the answer was, No, not because the Father rejected the Son, but because the Father was redirecting the Son through suffering to resurrection glory. That no brought salvation to the entire world. What looks like a denial in the moment may become deliverance for someone else down the road. The beauty of God's redirection is that it's never random. He's not out here closing doors just to test you. He's a master builder, constructing something sacred with every detour. The no you're struggling with today could be the setup for a testimony that shakes generations. You're not being left out. You're being led forward. You're not being punished. You're being positioned. You're not being forgotten. You're being formed. When God says no, heaven isn't quiet. Heaven is busy. Busy building, aligning, rewriting, preparing. And one day, when you look back on the thing you thought you needed, the door you thought you missed, you'll thank him for the redirection, because his no saved you from settling for what was good when he had destined you for what was great. We've all been there. You prayed, you believed, you fasted, you declared, but nothing happened. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. And now, you're wondering if God even heard you. The door you've been knocking on still hasn't opened, and your heart starts whispering lies. Maybe this isn't for me. Maybe God said no. Maybe I missed it. But let me remind you today, delay does not mean denial. Delay means development. God is not in a rush. We want quick answers, instant solutions, and fast results. But God operates in seasons. He's not working on your schedule. He's working on your soul. When you ask him for something, he doesn't just think about the thing. He thinks about you. He thinks about your character. He thinks about your ability to carry what you're asking for. And sometimes the delay is not because the blessing isn't ready. It's because you're not ready. Think about it. What good is a blessing if it breaks you? What good is promotion if it destroys your humility? What good is the platform if your heart isn't anchored in truth? God loves you too much to elevate you before you're equipped. So in his wisdom, he delays the yes, not to deny you, but to develop you. In the delay, God starts shaping you. He starts pruning your pride, strengthening your faith, deepening your prayer life. He doesn't just hand you what you asked for. He makes you become the person who can handle what you asked for. Because it's one thing to receive a blessing. It's another thing to sustain it. Let's take a look at Joseph. God gave him a dream as a teenager, a vision that he would lead and rule. But before the palace came the pit. Before the throne came the prison. 13 years passed between the dream and the fulfillment. Was that denial? No, it was divine development. God was building Joseph's endurance, sharpening his leadership, maturing his spirit. If Joseph had skipped the delay, he wouldn't have had the wisdom to lead a nation through famine. His delay was his preparation. His delay was his classroom. David was anointed king as a young shepherd boy, but he didn't take the throne the next day. In fact, he spent years running from Saul, hiding in caves and fighting battles. The anointing came early, but the appointment came later. Why? Because the crown requires more than oil. It requires refinement. God was teaching David how to trust, how to fight, how to worship through trials. The delay was never a denial. It was development in disguise. When God delays, he's not trying to frustrate you. He's trying to form you. He's forming discipline in your spiritual walk. He's forming consistency in your obedience. He's forming trust in his process, even when it doesn't match your plan. Development seasons are often quiet, unnoticed, even painful, but they are essential. See, we want harvest, but we forget that harvest comes after hidden seasons. A seed doesn't sprout the moment it's buried. It has to die, break open, grow roots, and be nourished in darkness. Only after that can it push through the surface. Your delay is your rooting season. God is taking you deeper before he takes you higher. Because shallow roots can't hold tall trees. If he gave you visibility before stability, your gift would shine, but your character would collapse. Delay teaches dependency. When you can't make things move in your own strength, you're forced to rely on God like never before. Delay strips away the illusion of control and teaches you that his timing is perfect. Delay refines your motives. Are you asking because you want glory or because you want to serve? Are you praying because you trust him or because you want to rush him? Delay is heaven's way of testing what's really in your heart. Even Jesus waited. The Son of God didn't begin his public ministry until he was 30. He didn't perform miracles as a child to prove himself. He waited. He was developed in obscurity. He grew in wisdom and stature and favor with God and man. If Jesus had a development season, how much more do we need ours? Sometimes God delays because what you're asking for is too small. You're praying for something that fits your vision, but he's planning something that fits his vision for you. He's stretching your capacity to believe for more. The delay makes room for a bigger blessing, a wider impact, a deeper purpose. Other times the delay isn't about you. It's about what God is doing around you. Maybe the people you'll impact aren't ready. Maybe the circumstances haven't aligned. Maybe the right door hasn't been built yet. So God puts you on pause not to punish you, but to preserve the purpose. It's not just about your blessing. It's about his timing for the greatest impact. We must stop interpreting silence as absence and delay as denial. God doesn't forget. He doesn't misplace promises. He doesn't overlook prayers. He's intentional. He's strategic. And if he's making you wait, it's because he's developing something in you that can't be rushed. Diamonds are developed under pressure. Gold is refined by fire, and faith is strengthened through waiting. Delay is God's training ground. It's where your strength is forged. It's where your calling is clarified. It's where your intimacy with God goes from surface to sacred. God's delays are always purposeful, always strategic, always filled with grace. We often cry out to God for better, a better life, a better relationship, a better opportunity, a better season. And yet, what we don't always recognize is that better isn't just something you receive. Better is something you must be prepared for. God does not release greater without also requiring growth. He doesn't just give you better. He gets you ready for better. We love the idea of elevation, but elevation without preparation becomes a burden instead of a blessing. If God were to drop better into your lap before you were ready, it wouldn't build you. It would break. The weight of better requires stronger shoulders. And before God trusts you with the promise, he trains you in private. Look at the way God works throughout Scripture. He never promotes without preparing first. Before the Israelites could inherit the promised land, they had to go through the wilderness. Why? Because Egypt had been in them even though they had left Egypt. They needed to be processed before they could be positioned. God knew that giving them better without changing their mindset would cause them to treat the promised land like the place of bondage they just left. So he used time, hardship, testing, and wandering to prepare their hearts for the weight of his promise. Preparation isn't always glamorous. It often happens in obscurity. It looks like repetition, discipline, pruning, and endurance. It looks like God stretching you in areas nobody sees. It looks like going through the same process again and again until faith becomes your default and obedience becomes your instinct. You may think nothing is happening, but God is strengthening the foundation underneath you. He's not ignoring your cry for better. He's equipping you to sustain what you're praying for. See, better requires more than desire. It requires development. You can want better, but if your character hasn't caught up to your calling, the blessing will slip through your fingers. You can pray for marriage, but can you steward covenant? You can ask for promotion, but are you submitted to authority? You can hope for a platform, but do you have the humility to carry influence without letting it become your identity? When God is preparing you for better, he doesn't just refine your circumstances. He refines you. He starts adjusting your values. He exposes hidden pride. He detoxes your motives. He sharpens your focus. Because better isn't just about what's around you. It's about what's within you. Before God builds externally, he works internally. Before he trusts you with the next level, he tests your stewardship of this one. Consider David. Before he was king, he was a shepherd. And it was in the fields, not the throne room, where God prepared him. While watching sheep, he learned how to lead. While fighting off lions and bears, he learned how to protect. In obscurity, God was shaping a king. David wasn't waiting to be discovered. He was being developed. And when the time came, God didn't have to find someone else. David was already prepared to handle better because he didn't waste the preparation season. Joseph is another picture of this truth. God gave him dreams of greatness, of leadership, of favor, of influence. But the path to better led him through betrayal, slavery, and prison. Each step wasn't a setback, it was preparation. In Potiphar's house, he learned responsibility. In the prison, he learned administration and patience. All of it was strategic. So when he stood before Pharaoh, he wasn't just a dreamer. He was a man developed for destiny. Preparation seasons often come with disappointment. You watch others step into their better while you're still stuck in the hallway. But comparison will blind you to the purpose of your own process. Don't despise where you are. Every delay is training. Every unanswered prayer is refining. Every hardship is shaping. God is not punishing you with time. He is positioning you through time. Better always costs something. The greater the calling, the deeper the preparation. God is not interested in quick fixes or shortcuts. He is building something lasting. He's not just trying to get you to your destination. He's shaping you into the kind of person who can represent him well when you get there. Sometimes the preparation is practical, skills, stewardship, discipline. Sometimes it's emotional, healing from wounds, forgiving the past, building emotional maturity. Other times it's spiritual, growing in discernment, learning to walk by faith, developing a heart that listens to God's voice over every other voice. And most of the time, it's all of the above. God leaves no part of you untouched when he's preparing you for better. We must learn to embrace preparation. It is not punishment. It is proof of God's intention to do something significant through you. He doesn't prepare those he's forgotten. He prepares those he plans to promote. And while you may not see the fruit of your preparation right now, there will come a moment when everything you went through will make sense. Every delay will prove necessary. Every struggle will become strength. Every unseen sacrifice will become part of the platform God establishes for you. Because in his kingdom, better is never random. Better is always the result of deep, intentional, holy preparation. When God says no, it can feel like the dream has died. The door has shut. The hope has vanished. You pray in faith, believe with everything in you, and still the answer comes back no. In that moment, it's easy to believe you've missed your opportunity or that God has closed off something good from your life. But what if that no is actually a setup for something greater than what you asked for? What if the no you're crying over is leading you straight to a bigger yes you couldn't yet imagine? God doesn't say no without purpose. Every divine denial carries hidden intention. He's not randomly blocking you. He's rerouting you. And often his no is the first step toward a breakthrough that's better, bigger, and more aligned with his perfect than what you initially wanted. Our problem is that we often pray from a limited perspective. We see life through the narrow lens of what we think is best, what we want right now, and what feels good in the moment. But God sees from eternity. He sees how today's yes could become tomorrow's burden. He sees how the thing you're begging for might actually be the thing that blinds you to your real purpose. So instead of giving you what you asked for, he gives you something better. But to get you there, he first has to say no. Consider this. You asked for a relationship to work out, but God says no. And months later, you realize that connection would have cost you your peace, your values, and your identity. You asked for a door to open in your career, but God blocks it, only to lead you into a purpose-filled opportunity you didn't even know existed. God's no is not the end of the story. It's a plot twist, a holy disruption that sets the stage for his bigger why's. Think about the life of Moses. He asked God to enter the promised land. After all the sacrifices, the leadership, the wilderness years, Moses just wanted to cross over. But God said no. That seems harsh until you realize that Moses' legacy wasn't limited to a geographical destination. His no became part of a bigger yes. The yes of being known as the greatest prophet of Israel, the man who saw God face to face, the one through whom the law came, and the one who later appears on the Mount of Transfiguration with Jesus. The denial was painful, but the divine purpose was powerful. Or look at Paul. He prayed 3 times for God to remove the thorn in his flesh. He begged, he pleaded, he sought relief. But God's response was, no, my grace is sufficient. That wasn't rejection. That was redirection. God was saying, no, I won't take it away because I want to show you that my power works best when you're weak. That no opened the door to a bigger yes. A yes to deeper revelation, greater humility, and more enduring spiritual authority. Paul didn't get what he wanted, but he got what he needed. Even Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane prayed, Father, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me. In his humanity, he asked for the cross to be avoided. But heaven was silent. The answer was no. Why? Because through that no came the biggest yes in all of history. The yes of redemption, the yes of salvation, the yes of resurrection power for every soul who believes. The no to his plea became the yes to our eternal hope. God's no always leads to a bigger yes when you trust him with the outcome. The challenge is that we often give up at the no. We stop praying, we stop believing, we assume it's over. But faith says, if God said no to this, it must mean he's preparing something I can't see yet. Faith says, if this door closed, it must be because a better one is about to open. And many times we treat God like a genie, expecting him to grant our wishes in the exact way we asked. But God is not in the business of granting wishes. He's in the business of fulfilling destiny. And destiny doesn't always come in the form you expected. Sometimes it comes wrapped in disappointment. Sometimes it comes disguised as failure. Sometimes it comes through a painful no that makes no sense in the moment. But if you keep walking, if you keep trusting, you'll look back and thank God for what he didn't allow. The bigger yes is often something that wouldn't have been on your radar. It might not come in the time you expected or the package you envisioned, but it will carry more purpose, more peace, more fruit, and more alignment with your identity in Christ. You're asking for enough to get by. God's preparing more than enough to fulfill your calling. You're asking for survival. He's setting you up for overflow. Don't measure God's goodness by how many prayers he says yes to. Measure his goodness by how often his no kept you from settling for less. Measure his faithfulness by how he navigated you through the fog of disappointment into a future that holds far more than what you thought you lost. Because when God says no, he's not done. He's just making room for a yes that will bless you, grow you, stretch you, and ultimately reveal his glory in ways beyond what you imagined. There are moments in life when God doesn't make sense. You're walking in obedience, doing everything right, and still the storm comes. Still the door closes. Still the answer is delayed, or worse, denied. And in those moments when life feels unpredictable and the path ahead feels unclear, the greatest test of your faith is not your ability to move forward, but your ability to trust God when you don't understand his hand. It's easy to trust God when the doors are opening. It's easy to trust him when the prayers are being answered, the breakthroughs are flowing, and the blessings are visible. But what about when the opposite happens? What about when life feels unfair? When your faith doesn't shield you from pain and your prayers seem to go unanswered? That's when real trust is forged. God's hand is not always visible, but it's always at work. His movements aren't always explainable, but they're always intentional. The problem is we want clarity before we give God our confidence. We want to see before we surrender. But trust says, even when I don't understand what you're doing, I believe you're doing something good. Consider Job. He lost everything, his health, his wealth, his family, his peace. And he didn't get a reason why. He didn't get an explanation. He got silence. But in the middle of his pain, Job declared, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. That kind of faith doesn't come from understanding God. It comes from knowing God, knowing his character, his heart, and his track record. There are some seasons where God will withhold the why in order to develop the who. He's not just answering your prayers. He's shaping your identity. He's deepening your trust, because trust isn't built in comfort. It's built in confusion. It's built when you feel lost, but you choose to follow him anyway. When you feel abandoned, but still cling to his promises. When the light is gone, but your hope remains. In John 13:7, Jesus tells Peter, you do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand. That's a word for anyone walking through the dark. You might not understand the loss. You might not understand the delay. You might not understand why God let certain things happen the way they did. But trust doesn't require full understanding. It requires full surrender. It requires you to trust that the same God who authored your beginning is still in control of your middle and faithful to bring you to the end. Sometimes God will allow the very thing you fear to come into your life, not to break you, but to build you. You're asking God to deliver you from it, and he's using it to develop something in you. That diagnosis, that heartbreak, that closed door. It may feel like a detour, but it's actually a tool in the hands of the master potter, shaping you into the vessel he designed you to be. Think about Abraham. God told him to sacrifice Isaac, the very promise he had waited years to receive. None of it made sense. Why would God give him a son only to ask for him back? But Abraham didn't argue. He obeyed even when he didn't understand. He trusted the hand of God over the logic of man. And because of that trust, Abraham walked right into a miracle, a ram in the bush, a divine provision that was waiting on the other side of his obedience. The more you mature in your walk with God, the more you'll realize that trust has very little to do with feelings and everything to do with faith. You won't always feel God working, but he is. You won't always understand the process, but it's necessary. You won't always be able to explain your situation, but you can endure it when your trust is anchored in the truth that God is good even when life is not. God never promised to explain everything, but he did promise to never leave you nor forsake you. He promised to work all things, not some things, all things together for your good. And that includes the tears you cried in secret, the battles you didn't choose, and the pain you didn't see coming. Trusting him means believing that even when your plans fall apart, his purpose is still intact. Sometimes God's hand rearranges what you built. He disrupts your comfort, closes doors, and removes people you thought would be permanent. And in that moment, it may feel like loss, but later you realize it was love. Love that wouldn't let you settle. Love that wouldn't let you miss destiny. Love that tore it down so he could build it up again, stronger, wiser, and more aligned with his divine design. You don't have to have all the answers to walk in faith. You don't need a map when you're walking with the Maker. He sees what you can't. He knows what you don't. And he's already gone ahead of you to prepare the way. Trusting his hand means releasing control, surrendering the outcome, and declaring, God, even when I don't see it, I still believe. Even when I don't get it, I still praise. Even when it doesn't look like victory. I know you've never lost a battle.